with the heightening of the restriction of speech everywhere from social media to our personal lives. It stands that we, as social people, should be able to express ourselves with the right that is freedom of speech. In a time in which freedom of speech is restricted, should freedom of speech be significant and recognized as such in a school environment? Well, in my opinion, freedom of speech is a necessary right for everyone, especially for students in a school. I'll elaborate on that soon, but first, what exactly is freedom of speech? Freedom of speech is a principle that supports the freedom of an individual or a community to articulate their opinions and ideas without fear of retaliation, censorship, or legal sanction as long as it does not hurt others. Now, what is the importance of freedom of speech in general anyways, right? How is it important in a public environment? Freedom of speech is important in a public environment because it allows people to express themselves. It allows people to say their opinions. Freedom of speech can be used to do so many good things, like criticize a bad government and in turn bettering it because of those critics and opinions, right? Seeing as how important it is for freedom of speech to be available outside of schools, obviously it would also be significant and important in a school environment. Freedom of speech can help students in schools in a few ways. How so? With the freedom of speech, these students can be more inquisitive and ask questions that may not have been asked, like questioning the actions of authorities that may not have been questioned if not for freedom of speech. An example would be, isn't this tradition we do kind of racist? And because of this, people would question it more and more, and perhaps the school would stop doing that tradition or something of the like. Another reason why freedom of speech would be necessary in school is that people sometimes do not speak up about a situation that would otherwise make them feel uncomfortable. When we have the right that is freedom of speech, we can speak up about these things without being retaliated by the superiors. Especially when the people at school are minors, we need their input and for them to not be afraid to talk about these things so we do not make them feel uncomfortable or perhaps even stressed when their brains haven't even fully developed yet. An example of this would be they can report and expose things like abusive and questionable actions done by teachers and whatnot without being suspended by the principal for tarnishing the school's reputation. Another point I like to bring up is that people fail to realize how significant freedom of speech is when it is ingrained into our Pancasila, which is the basis of all the laws and mindsets of our country. I would argue that without freedom of speech present in general, especially in schools, which is the place we learn about and practice the Pancasila, we would be going against one of the things said in the Pancasila. Let me explain. The fourth commandment of our Pancasila basically tells us that discussions are the best way to decide something, right? And without this freedom of speech, how would we be able to hold discussions and say what we're truly feeling without repercussion from the people in charge? If we truly do not want to implement freedom of speech and recognize how important it is in schools, how will we be able to fully live out the mindset that the Pancasila has dictated? Okay, maybe you'd say that they do not need freedom of speech yet because they're minors. Valid point, I suppose. But what happens when they graduate? They will not be used to contributing to full ideas in discussions. As a result of not having freedom of speech in schools, they wouldn't say their full ideas because they do not want the repercussion that they would have faced in schools for voicing their opinions. If we do not recognize the significance and importance of having freedom of speech in schools, they in turn wouldn't stand up for themselves, and this would cause an effect, worsening the quality of life for basically everyone involved. If we continue to let freedom of speech be ignored and not recognize its significance, we would be harming and dooming whoever that would be learning in these schools. We need to acknowledge the powers that having freedom of speech holds, for not only does it help our students, but it also helps our future. Thank you.